Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of our HBS HAA viewers, and as well as all Harvard affiliated who have joined us today. We are so grateful to this panel gathered to discuss this very important topic, women's health gaps and innovations. Thank you so much for joining us. Our audience is always part of what makes this great, so we do hope that you will participate and put your questions in the Q&A so our panelists can see them. We really appreciate your involvement in the topic, and we would love to have your feedback at the end too on our survey. We'd also like to thank our sponsors who always help get these things going for us, so please visit our website to see all of their information as well. We're so grateful. I would like to now turn this over to Liz Powell, who has organized this panel for us, and ask you to introduce each of our speakers and have them tell a little about themselves and get everything started. So again, thank you all so much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We're really excited about today's discussion. We have some very impressive speakers. So what I will do is run the slides, and each presenter will give their background very quickly as they start to present their slides. Since you all were able to read their very impressive bios with the registration, we just thought that would give us a little bit more time to spend on the discussion today. And I am putting up the slides, trying to do presentation mode. And slideshow, there it is. Sorry about that. Okay. So today, those are the speakers, and then these are the topics that we're going to discuss. So first off, sex differences. Most people understand this on some level, but when you start to get down into the details, it actually is affecting our health, especially women's health, down to the cellular level. And there are all these sex differences that we're seeing. And it's what we're seeing are there are certain health conditions that solely, disproportionately, or differently impact women. And so there's 8 different ways that we've categorized this just to make it easier to drill it down. So you see adverse drug events, twice as common in women, aging, all kinds of aging related conditions, whether it's bone health, osteoporosis, menopause. There's tons of different subcategories that fall into that. Autoimmune disease, something like 80% of all autoimmune disease patients are women. Heart disease is a huge problem, and often it's misdiagnosed because the signs are based, what doctors have been trained to see are based on men, white men primarily. So you can see that there's different levels, particularly among women who are Black or Hispanic, very, very concerning numbers. There's cognitive and brain health, Alzheimer's, 2/3 of all Alzheimer's patients are women, and they're also the caregivers. So they've got both sides on that issue. Gynecological health, sexual health. We're going to talk a lot about ovarian cancer today, but most people don't realize that 1 in 2 women with ovarian cancer die. So that is the highest mortality rate of any sex-specific cancer. Endometriosis, many other gynecological health conditions. Cancer, of course, there's many different kinds of cancers, and some impact women differently. And so there's lots of nuances within that. And then finally, reproductive and maternal health. There are some staggering statistics there. In particular, Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to experience pregnancy-related death. So it's really important to sort of start off today with that understanding that there are these differences, that there are specific health conditions that solely, disproportionately, or differently impact women. And most of all, that these differences go down to the cellular level. And that is citing a report by the Institute of Medicine back from 2001. We're now in 2022. So we have a ways to go to fully appreciate and include that recognition inside our research and development of new health innovations. So with that sort of stage setting information, what I wanted to do is then pass it off to our first speaker, Valerie Palmeri.
Thank you, Liz, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for giving us this opportunity. First, just going to start with a brief background. My name is Valerie Palmeri. I've been in diagnostics for over 30 years. I'm a scientist by trade and really have focused on how we can deliver diagnostics down to the point of care, so meaning access for all. And so I've worked with a company that actually spawned out of Sloan Kettering, where we created an assay that could be offered not just at an academia center, but could be offered countrywide, specifically to oncology diagnostics. So, and what I'm going to discuss here with you is really the focus on women's health. And what you'll see here is with ovarian cancer, 1 out of 2 women die. The mortality rate is staggering for women of color, and how we're going to solve that with a non-invasive test so we can get ahead of the disease and really assess the cancer at an early stage. So I'd like to move to the next slide, which will actually give you just a short overview of a video. Liz, I don't think the audio is working.
The video is not working?
The video is working, the audio is not working on it. There we go.
Everyone is different. Our makeups are different.
As physicians taking care of women, we have to acknowledge the disparity that
it just worked.
It's working now.
Oh,
Yep.
okay.
You're good.
Every woman is different. Our makeups are different.
as physicians taking care of women, we have to acknowledge the disparity that exists in ovarian cancer.
40 years ago, CA-125 was created for those who had access to care, primarily Caucasian women.
We have a desperate need for a better test for African-American women for early cancer detection, for monitoring, because the current test, the CA-125, is not an adequate test.
We go into our doctor's offices, we go to these different places to receive care, and then we're just given outdated information. It's important to know that Over1+ exists and that it's available.
Over1+ offers testing using a multi-biomarker algorithm, which measures changes in nutrition and inflammation. And that is the very unique aspect of Over1+. It is resolving a disparity in testing that exists for African-American women.
We're in the United States of America, and we are still fighting to have a place in our healthcare, and it should not be that. It's important to know that Over1+ exists and that it's available.
So that just gives you a grounding of what we're going to be speaking about. And it starts with the mortality rate. As Liz mentioned, 1 out of 2 women die, and the mortality rate is 65% because the majority is detected at late stage. Next slide. The root cause of the late stage detection really stems from the current standard of care is inadequate, which is physical exam and ultrasound, where you have an off-label use of a test that's 40 years old, which was for recurrence monitoring, and you cannot biopsy your pelvic cavity. So the doctors really have inadequate tools. Next slide. So as we're changing this, as we mentioned in the video, how is Over1 different? So we're measuring nutrition changes, inflammatory changes, and tumor marker. And what we have here is a representation of Over1 versus CA-125 and Over1 versus CA-125 and HE4. And what you'll see here is that CA-125 or CA-125 and HE4 may miss 37 to 46% of ovarian cancer in Black women. Over1 detects 79% of that cancer. Asian Pacific Islanders have a higher age-adjusted incident rate than white, Black, or American Indian women. And even in ethnicity, from the ethnicity side, Hispanic women are diagnosed in an earlier age than non-Hispanic groups. So we truly are not a homogeneous society. And our company is the first company, starting with studies we're doing in Israel and the Philippines, where we are actually seeing these differences that are based on race and ethnicity. Next slide. So how does that actually sum up in terms of early stage? And what you'll see here is this is Over1 versus the current standard of care in stage 1 and stage 2. So some of these footing looks a little different on my screen. But the essence here, the bottom line is that Over1 will detect 98% sensitivity with early stage disease, where you can beat that cancer. So survival rate is 70 to 90% versus a survival rate of 20 to 30% for late stage. So it's very important to understand that a simple non-invasive test, CA-125 or OVA1, we can really make the difference between life or death. Next slide. So as we ensure access for all, we're not even just focused on just the technology. The technology is, I want to say, the easier part of the equation. The harder part of the equation is ensuring that we have access for everyone. So we've been working over the last 3 years to get every single Medicaid state agency on board with our technology. We right now, as I'm happy to report, as of last week, we just landed Washington, DC, and we've brought it up to currently 80% of the Medicaid lives in the US are now credentialed for our technology, which means that they are stating our technology is medically necessary. And then we go to contract with them in terms of having the Medicaid state agencies pay for the technology. So this is a very important, you see a lot of, excuse me, a lot of red on this map, but we focused on the large states, which were the top 9. And if you have no insurance, you get no access. So even though you can have the best performing technology, if the insurance is not in place, then women will not be able to access it. Next slide. And just to sum up, the call to action is really to help us change the reality of ovarian cancer. As we mentioned, 1 in 2 women die. It's the only gender-specific cancer with over 50% mortality rate. If you compare it to breast cancer, it's 1 in 10 versus 1 in 2. So we need to build awareness about OVA1. Number 2 is Black women have a much higher mortality rate, and that's a combination of lack of healthcare access, but most importantly, also lack of diagnostics being utilized. Some of them don't even get access to the base diagnostics, such as CA-125. Also, in terms of funding, today, the company, our initial funding came from the DoD. Our funding is all self-funded, so I raised capital to fund diversity studies. If you just look at prostate cancer in this particular side-by-side, prostate cancer survival rate is 98%, yet ovarian cancer gets 36% less funding, and we need to change that on Capitol Hill. And every day, 60 women in the US are diagnosed and 38 women die, and 1 out of 2 do not make it. So it starts with you. It starts with your symptoms in terms of the beat. We call it bloating, eating, feeling full, abdominal pain, trouble with bladder, meaning you have to go to the bathroom during the night. So it starts with you and actually carrying that discipleship. It also starts with understanding your family history. Look in the mirror, talk to your aunts, your grandmothers, your sisters, make sure that that's journaled. Family history is so important. With this disease, normally cancer is only 5 to 10% genetic. With ovarian cancer, it's 10 to 30%. And then spread the word about OVA1 for pelvic mass risk assessment. It really can change a life and make the difference between if you're low risk, you can stay with your local doctor, but if you're high risk, you need to get to 1 of 1,000 doctors in the US. Thank you, Liz. And thank you, the Harvard team.
Alicia.
Yes, hi everyone. I'm happy to be here in this amazing conversation about women's health. So I'm Alicia. I'm the founder and CEO at Bloomer Health Tech. My background is in electrical engineering and computer science. And I want to start with telling the story of how we decided to focus on this space and predominantly on the gaps in cardiovascular disease in women. And if you think about it, when I was doing undergrad, I was typically one woman in a class of 40 people, and that was pretty shocking, but you get used to it. Then when I came to MIT to do my graduate studies and I joined the computational cardiovascular research group, one of the first things that I noticed was that in most of the data sets, and I had access to huge data sets, only 1 in every 4 clinical trial participants was female. And that was pretty shocking. And then when you talked with other students about these issues and all of the, right, like Liz showed the risks in women, right? There's 44 million women in the US alone that live with some form of heart disease, and 1 in 3 women die of heart disease in the US. And you talk about it, we realize that we all have a personal history when it comes to heart disease in women. And one of my co-founders, Monica, she was actually waiting at school when she was 12 years old for her mom to pick her up. And that just never happened, you know, and that like her mom had suddenly passed away, and her mom was a 44-year-old physician. So these type of things we don't typically talk about. I had lost my grandma when I was 13 years old from a heart attack. And once you connect the dots, you realize, wow, this is a huge problem. It happens a lot. And if we talk about it, we realize that it's closer than we think. It happens so quickly that usually we don't really reflect on the fact that cardiovascular disease is very close to all of us. So we decided we should do something about it, especially because 15 years after these events happened in your personal life that completely changes your life, we realized that all of the technology is still the same. It is not designed to be woman-centric. We now have over 30 years of evidence that shows that women and men present symptoms differently, and we could definitely figure out a way to do something about it. And this is when we came up with BloomerTech, where we're generating non-invasive digital biomarkers for women's health, and we're using this textile sensor that you see in this image to integrate it seamlessly into everyday clothing, and we're integrated into an everyday bra, since women have it as part of their day-to-day habits. And we're collecting very valuable medical grade data from all around the torso. So if we go to the next slide, our main focus with these digital biomarkers is to prevent deadly and overlooked medical challenges with the discrete comfort of advanced fabrics and the precision of the digital biomarkers. And when we talk about digital biomarkers, we look at it like currently there's a lot of traditional biomarkers like blood, like weight, like blood pressure that take just a snapshot in time. They really only take that picture of the moment that you took that test. And a digital biomarker has the power of giving you more than a snapshot. It can give you a full video, right? Like you're continuously always collecting and collecting data from and digitizing it from your body. So in the next slide, I don't know what happens to the slide, but
I was trying to change it to presenter mode, and I had to shut down the video. So hopefully this will work. I apologize.
yes, no, it's okay. Yeah, so in the next slide, you will see the image of our platform. And our platform, right, we consider that the power of Lily is hidden in its comfort, and it consists of these medical grade sensors integrated seamlessly into an everyday bra, so it looks and feels like any other bra that you've ever used, but now it has the power to collect seamlessly valuable data like the electrocardiogram, heart rate variability, and a temperature sensor, which gives us a lot of very good information in the female physiology, and then the accelerometer for position and movement. It connects via Bluetooth to a mobile app, and it uploads to generate valuable reports to the cloud. Right, we're currently using this mostly for collecting vast amounts of data, and this is the power that a tool that is designed in a woman-centric way can give us, because we can actually accelerate a lot of the disadvantages that we've had in the past, because women's data has not been collected, and we can like extremely accelerate it by people wearing it. So we're actively looking for participants and for sponsors of the different data banks that we're generating. So if you are interested in learning more on how to become part of this growing community, please join us. It's a very exciting moment to kind of transform the way we do care into something that is more proactive rather than reactive, and that it's inclusive to all of us. And if we go to the next slide. I think we missed one slide. No? sorry, well, there was one slide where it shows a lot of articles that talk about all of this missing data in women, because the reality is that there's a huge problem right now where people are generating all of these digital health tools based on existing data. And existing data does not include women. Like for many years, it was until 1993 that women were included in clinical trials. So there are going to be a lot of gaps if we don't start kind of creating a more access to data, right? And for the optimization of all of these digital health tools. And what is really exciting is that a few weeks ago, the FDA announced a new framework to explore these issues of how existing medical devices are underperforming or are suboptimal for women, right? Because they just haven't been designed with enough information about women, like either because of lack of enrollment in clinical trials or because it was just not contemplated into the design. There's so many things we can talk about in terms of how our lifestyle and our environment makes a big difference, and how existing technologies today are affected by things that that women do, and we can completely change it by having women-centric design. And I think genetics opened a huge window towards precision medicine, and we're now all realizing that precision medicine is going to get there when we understand lifestyle and environments better. And that's the rise of population-specific platforms. And that's something that we're really excited to see and to be on the leading edge with a woman-centric platform like ours. So next slide. Again, this is to invite you. The background of the name of the company is because Amelia Bloomer was a dress reform advocate of the 1800s who completely transformed the way we use clothes today by changing those damaging corsets into more comfortable garments for women. And we want to pioneer and take it to the next level so that digital therapeutics, digital diagnostics can include and focus on, and we can usher these new technologies in women's health in this 21st century. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Pineda.
Right, thank you so much for inviting me here. It's a pleasure to be presenting at this panel. What we do in Darmion is a paradigm shift for brain health screening and monitoring. My name is Padide Kamalizare. My background is neuroscience. I received my PhD in biophysics and computational neuroscience and was the research professor in neuroscience before starting the company. And I was among 40 under 40 in healthcare sector of Fortune in 2020. And also last year was the top 25 women leader in biotechnology. And we went to Y Combinator in 2017. And we were also nominated on top of the list of UCSF. Next slide, please. What we do in Darmion is to help preventing dementia through early detection and accurate monitoring. Why is this important? For early detection, as we know, it's true for all diseases, it enables early interventions and life and care planning. Accurate monitoring, it captures the patient-specific response to interventions, and those interventions could be brain healthy programs, therapeutics, lifestyle modifications that having the possibility to monitor the response to these interventions encourage people to stay brain healthy and to stay within the course of interventions. And it's true that we all need to look out for our cognitive future to reduce chances we will have another costly silent pandemic. Next slide, please. Our technology and products are fully proprietary and patented in the US and Japan. And our products are all AI-powered software platforms. The business model is SaaS. And we use data that is already a part of patient medical record and data that is coming from tests that are fully non-invasive and also globally accessible around the world. The AI takes that data and produces a score that is predicting the future of the brain. And the good news about our scoring system is that it's actionable, it guides interventions, and also, as I mentioned, it enables accurate monitoring. And this is the first time in the history of human brain studies and research that we do have an objective tool to monitor our brain health, and we do not have to rely only on subjective assessments of how we feel or how we do in terms of cognition or how we perform on questionnaires. Our first product is called Brainzy, is our first product, and it provides a 5-year prognosis of mild cognitive impairments. It's FDA breakthrough designation. We received the status a few months ago, and we are in the process of full submission to the FDA. We will get the full FDA approval hopefully by the end of this year, so it will be available in clinics and hospitals. And what we mean by 5-year prognosis of MCI is that, today, next slide, please. I think I do have it in next slide. Basically, today's world is that if somebody has a mild cognitive impairment as the diagnosis, that is over 160 million people around the world, it means that they are in the gray zone of not really cognitively healthy today, but also since they are doing everyday life pretty well and they are still independent from family members, they are not Alzheimer's dementia yet, right? So they fall into this gray zone. Today, nobody knows what's going to happen for them in the future. They could stay stable or even improve, which means that their mild cognitive impairment is not due to a degenerative disease. Therefore, the brain can do well even in the future. Or they do have a neurodegenerative disease that is progressive and it's kind of, it damages the whole brain in time, and they will become an Alzheimer's dementia patient within 5 years. Today, if you wait long enough that the person is demented, of course, you will know that, oh, this person, that mild cognitive impairment meant that they are Alzheimer's patients. But that's too late, unfortunately, to be able to do something positive for the brain and change the course of the disease, slow down the disease progression, or change the kind of life and care planning that the patient is on. Next slide, please. What the world would look like with Brainzy in it is that the same day that the patient is diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment and doctors tell them that you are in the gray zone, so they know exactly what's going to happen to them in the next 5 years. And this differentiation between whether they are going to stay stable or they are going to progress, that would happen the same day as the AI produces the results within few hours of online processing and parallel computing in the cloud. Next slide, please. With this technology and our products, we are addressing the global crisis of dementia that, again, I mentioned that is through prevention or postpone the onset of symptoms. Today, around 6 million Americans live with Alzheimer's dementia. Unfortunately, 2/3 of them are women. It means like 4 million of them. And I have some, personal feeling about this, that why is this affecting women more than men, that I can contribute in the discussion later. The global cost today is $1.3 trillion. That is going to be $2.8 trillion by 2030. 1 in every 5 Medicare dollars is spent on Alzheimer's, and predictions is that unless a revolution happens in this field, Alzheimer's is going to bankrupt the entire healthcare system as the baby boomer generation is aging. And another bad news for women is that women are also more likely to be caregivers to those living with Alzheimer's disease. That, caregiving is such a huge task. And now, in hospitals, we see a lot that doctors tell the caregiver that they should take care of themselves more than they are taking care of the patient, because there's much more risk for them than for the patient. So it's a really critical issue that we are facing. Next slide, please. This is the founding team. I told you about myself. My co-founder, Dr. Thomas Liebman. He's world-renowned neuroscientist, well-published in Cell and Nature, and he worked with Nobel Prize laureates and also with Stanford president, Dr. Mark Tessier-Levin, who was the Rockefeller University president before Stanford. And my other co-founder is Dr. Kaveh Vejdani. He's a former radiologist at Stanford, specialized in PET, MRI, and also he's expert in medical image processing. Next slide, please. And we are very fortunate to work with high impact key opinion leaders and who are serving on our advisory board. Dr. Lawrence Tannenbaum, he is the CTO of RadNet, and RadNet is the largest imaging network in the US. And also Dr. Susie Bash, she's one of the advocates for AI in radiology and medicine, and she's been extremely helpful providing insights to the company how to make this more accessible for patients around the world. Dr. Charles Nicholson, he's the scientific father of brain tissue microstructure modeling, that he was my mentor at NYU. And Nima Farzan is Harvard MBA, and he's a very successful entrepreneur, sold one company already, and his recent company, Kinet Biopharma, got IPO last year, I guess. And he helps with relationship with big pharma, how to make a synergy between what we do with therapeutics that are out there. Next slide, please. Our customers are ranging from clinics and hospitals and pharmaceutical companies, wellness programs, and also insurance companies for different purposes, for patient selection and drug effect monitoring, or if wellness companies have any particular solution that they think it's going to help people need to have real world evidence that they work. So we provide that real world evidence by monitoring patient specific intervention effect. And next slide, please. And we have received a wide range of testimonials from our early users, adopters, and they predict that this is going to be a revolutionary AI in the brain health. And we look forward to launch this soon after FDA approval in all these clinics. Next slide, please. Okay, now it gets more to women's side of things, that there is this program at Cleveland Clinic that is focused on women, and it's basically helping women to understand their specific risk factors that are stress, anxiety, depression in one category. They need to take a better care of their diet, exercise routine, sleep, and also medical conditions, menopause, cognitive activity. I personally have done some research on this program, and I recommend that. And I believe that even if somebody is a caregiver for a dementia patient, it's really good to start getting to know about these programs that are out there, and they are reducing the stigma around brain health and Alzheimer's, and they are differentiating normal aging from Alzheimer's disease. That is really important. And thank you so much. I will also contribute to the discussion. I would be happy to share with you why I believe women are much more affected in terms of their brain health and why they get more Alzheimer's disease. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda.
Linda, you are muted.
There we
Thank
go.
you. I was better on mute, trust me. I'm a co-founder of Vivestria Ventures, and I'm an MBA from the Harvard Business School. We founded Vivestria Ventures in 2019 to invest in early stage women's health companies and female founded life science ventures. And we're based in the San Francisco Bay Area. Next slide. So I spent my career working, both investing in healthcare companies and then working at life science and molecular diagnostics companies. And I was really embarrassed a few years back when I had no idea that there was, when in clinical trials, women had been excluded from them. And still today, even though women are allowed to participate in clinical trials, and most companies are being encouraged to include women in clinical trials, there's still a significant number of clinical trials where they're not even analyzing the data by biological sex. And in med school, until relatively recently, medical students were taught that women were essentially small men. So doctors were trained to treat the average patient, which was a 150-pound male. And I think that we've now learned that men and women's biology is so different, and it really is not one size fits all. And yet we've completely created a healthcare system that is prepared to treat men. So one thing that I was surprised at is I had no idea about this. I'd been investing in healthcare, and I had been working in healthcare, and I had seen all sorts of data about, oh, this clinical trial, this number of patients responded positively. But I never once thought to ask myself, well, what was the biological sex of the people in the clinical trials? So that was a real wake-up moment for me. And I started paying more attention to the space. And when you look at it, women make 80% of all household healthcare decisions, and women are 80% of the US healthcare workforce. So this is not an area where there's any reason women shouldn't be 50% of, the decision makers and 50% of the healthcare dollars. And really, it's a field that women should dominate. Then one of the most distressing things I've learned is that only 4% of all healthcare R&D and 11% of NIH funding is directed towards women's health. So if we can accept that the health of men and women is substantially different, how can you rationalize that only 4% of all healthcare R&D and 11% of NIH funding is directed specifically towards women's health? So that was distressing to me. And I also, when you dig into the NIH numbers, I originally thought, well, maybe there are only certain diseases that are really women specific, and the bulk of the funding is for more general health. But when you look at it, they're funding for cardiovascular disease, and cardiovascular disease is the #1 killer of women. And as many women die of cardiovascular disease as men, but only 4% of the cardiovascular disease research at the NIH for funding is directed towards women. So these numbers do not make sense. Then the other thing that has not changed in over 20 years is only 2% of all VC dollars is invested in female-founded companies. And to me, that makes no sense. Next slide. So then when you look at this, we've got a $4 trillion healthcare market, right? It's a huge market. It continues to grow. So when I looked at this, I thought this is an amazing business opportunity, right? That most of the investment community is just missing. And when you look at it, of all the US venture capital investments that are going into life sciences, only $385 million in 2020 went into women's health. So that's less than 1% of all of the VC investment. Again, it's hard if you're a business school student, it's really hard to look at these numbers and not think there is a large unmet need and a huge business opportunity. So the next slide. One of the things that when I talked to some of the venture capitalists who had been in the business much longer than I was, they had said to me, we just can't find female founders to invest in. We'd really like to invest in them. And so, when we founded Avestria, we said, we don't think that really, based on what we're seeing on the ground, that's not really the reality. And so when we founded Avestria in 2019, again, we said we are going to invest in either women's health companies or female founders in the life science ventures, and it can be either or. And our portfolio today consists of 17 companies. It's a concentrated portfolio. 65% of those are based specifically for women's health. And of those, 94% have either a female founder or CEO. So they're out there. And so if venture capitalists are telling you that they're not finding these opportunities to invest in, they just don't have the right pipeline. Next slide. And this brings up really a bigger problem that we think that these gaps in the access to capital are really stifling innovation, and that in order for us to improve women's health, it may require changes in the investment community. And I think that it actually absolutely does require changes in the investment community. And when you look at the data, white males manage 99% of US financial assets. And that to me is an outstanding, just an incredible number. And again, I'm slightly older than many of you. And that might have made sense to me 30 years ago. Today, it makes no sense. And when you look at the venture capital community, and venture capital has been a very small community, and it's expanding now, but 84% of VC partners are male, 78% are white, and 65% of VC firms do not have any female partners. And one thing that anyone who's done any investing either for themselves or as part of a venture capital fund, that we all invest in things where we feel confident in our level of expertise, and we have networks and we have passion, right? And so if 84% of all the VC partners are male, one has to step back and say, is there a chance that among those VC partners, there's a lack of passion about women's health? There may be a lack of networking in the women's health community, right? And that wouldn't in any way be surprising. And when you look at the funding in 2020, 85% of the VC funding went to all male teams. So this isn't a matter of, okay, we're not backing female founders, but that doesn't matter if they're the founder. Women are part of the teams. Well, that's not really the case, right? And one thing that we've seen is that if the venture firm has a female partner, they're 3 times more likely to fund companies with female CEOs than are firms that have all male VC partners. What you're seeing in maybe the past 5 years, really 5 years, I'd say, that you're seeing more and more women saying, okay, I'm at a venture capital firm, and to be honest, I'm never going to make partner, or it's highly unlikely that I'm going to make partner at this firm. And so I'm going to go out and start my own fund. And you're seeing this not just among women, but also minorities, right, who are seeing that the current venture capital community doesn't look much like they look. So these are people who have gone out and started their own funds. And when you start a new fund, you're considered an emerging manager. That means you sort of start with a track record of day 0, right? And there's a chicken and the egg with raising money, especially in the institutional investor community, which is LPs want to see 10 years of a track record, and they want to see that you're already managing hundreds of millions in assets. So while we're seeing more and more women leading VC funds, they're not getting adequate capital to really impact the market. Next slide. So, to me, this was a confounding situation because it represented such a huge business opportunity, and yet it wasn't changing. So for me, the way that I felt like I could best address this was to start Avestria Ventures. There are other ways that we can all change the current situation. One is, in terms of institutional capital, one of the things you can do is you can ask your alma mater to report the percentage of endowment assets that are allocated to female and minority managers, with the goal of reaching 50% female, 40% minorities, right? And this sort of goes back to the idea that if you don't measure it, how can you manage it, and how can you change it? And very, very few endowment funds or endowment teams today report this number. So I think the first thing to do is ask your alma mater to report it. The next thing you can do is ask them to set aside a portion of those assets to be run as funds of emerging women and minority managers. And the reason I think that fund of funds may be the interim solution is because if you're Yale and you're managing billions of dollars in endowment assets. You don't want to spend your time allocating $5 million to an emerging manager, right? You just don't have the shelf space to do that. So I think one of the ways you can do it is create these larger funds of funds. And then another thing you can do is just go to your alma mater and ask them to increase the percentage of financial assets directed towards women's health, right? Cryptocurrency is really exciting in many ways, but in my mind, so is women's health. And then what we can all do as voters in the US is we can find ways to encourage the NIH to provide equitable funding for women's health research. Another thing, obviously, you can do is, depending on your net worth, is you can invest in fund managers like Avestria Ventures. We're currently raising our second fund, and there are other fund managers like myself and like our team that are out there. So what you choose to do with your own personal wealth can make a big difference towards funding these amazing entrepreneurs that you've seen speak earlier in the panel. Because right now, I think most of them would tell you it's not that easy for them to get funding. And that's it.
Wow, very, very impressive. Thank you for sharing all that. Such powerful information from each of you. So we're going to start off with some questions. I think there's some questions being posted as well that we can entertain. So first off, it is 2022. There is social media, there is internet at our fingertips. There's no reason why people can't know these things. And yet it seems like there's a real lack of awareness on these sex differences, and that our system itself is not acknowledging. And so many of these clinical studies in particular, are still done on mostly male mice, male animals, for example. So what can we do to raise awareness, and specifically with things like Alzheimer's, where 2/3 of the patients are actually women? Like, what ideas do you have around that? What we can do, and why? Why do you think that still is happening? And would love to start with you, Padeta.
Right. So one major thing is, of course, awareness, raising awareness in any way we can. I think the most powerful one would be just talking to friends, family members, and educate them about the differences between normal aging and Alzheimer's disease, and mention that, this is just a disease like any other form of disease in the body. So we shouldn't really hide it or try to present ourselves differently when we do have cognitive and memory problems. So that's something that we often see in hospitals, that, some patients, they do much better than their brain is doing on questionnaires, just because they don't want their family members to know that there's something wrong with their brain. And we see, like in more traditional societies, opposite of this, that, because like elderly people, they need more attention from family members, they present themselves much worse than their brain is doing. It's just because they need more attention and care of their family members. So it's really, having the awareness and having right tools, and making everything accessible to a wide range of populations, especially lower income communities, and also reducing the stigma around these. Centers like AARP, for example, they are doing a great job in doing that awareness and educating people. Alzheimer's Association is one of the ones that is really active in this. And yeah, definitely, I believe education and awareness and talking about this as it's like a normal part of everybody's life, and it's going to happen. And so now they say that once we get to the age of 85, either we do get Alzheimer's or we are taking care of some loved ones who have the disease. So we better think about it today and try to address it.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Just going to power through some more questions here. So let's talk about design and the fact that there is this huge gap in designing wearables in particular, but as well as diagnostics, other therapeutics specifically for women, since we know that that every cell has a sex. So it really goes down to that cellular level. And I know that you've done a lot of work in this area and have some great data. So we'd love to pass to you, Alicia, for thoughts on that and what can be done about it.
Yes, I think that a topic that was talked by many of the panelists today is the fact that for a long time, women were considered small men, right? So a lot of the devices, existing medical devices, a lot of the tools that have been designed with that male physiology in mind. So in terms of anatomy, simple things like women are just not eligible to have a therapy because of the size or the length of the tool itself, right? So like that's a big barrier to taking care of something that you have if you're ineligible to a procedure because it wasn't designed around you. And I think there is this certain notion of the fact that people working in this space, manufacturers, try to make things very universal so that they have less SKUs, they have less to deal with in terms of having this full portfolio of different sizes of products and things like that. But we really need to take it to that next level, right? And take the best practice of businesses that have been successful having customization for the variety of people that we are, if we want to achieve healthcare that is suitable for everyone. And I think that's one of the things that the garment industry has done really well in terms of apparel, right? Like now we're seeing more and more plus size as well. In our case, we've thought about all of these things because obviously in terms of signal quality and the type of devices that we have, like there's a lot of noise and interference that comes not only from day to day and the form factor of your body, but also from activities that women tend to do, right? If they're breastfeeding, if they have a baby and they have to carry their child, if there's different activities that you do that can interfere with certain devices like implantable monitors, the placement that they are. If you had a breast implant because of a mastectomy, then you can't place that implantable. And I think in this new FDA strategy that they launched, it is just very interesting that they highlighted all of these defects, I would call them, of current existing devices because they perform suboptimal on women. They have examples of cardiac defibrillators because women were not participating in these trials, or that the female sex is a predictor of mortality, right, for percutaneous procedures. And then there's a lot of very valuable examples that are like the obvious that are stated in a document like this. And then there's the non-obvious that we still as a community need to be aware and voice them out, right? Like if you go to Instagram and you put #HeartMonitor, most of these heart monitors, the new cool stickers that people have, you will see pictures of women taking their selfies, right? And it's very interesting because the day one, they're excited. On day three, oh, my baby peeled it off. Oh, there's complaints on how it's just uncomfortable for them, right? So there's a lot of things that we as a community can do. I was sharing a few days ago about something that in 2017, the FDA communicated about biotin interference. A lot of women take biotin pills. A lot of tests have this biotin technology, which means that if you're taking biotin, a lot of diagnostic tests, including antigen tests from COVID and including a heart attack test like troponin, measuring the troponin levels, can be false positive or false negative, right? And this is like testing false positive for COVID can give you a lot of stress, but if you're feeling okay, you're good. But testing false negative for a troponin test, if you're having a heart attack, can kill you. So we have to be really careful because just a lifestyle habit of taking a vitamin, a multivitamin that has biotin could interfere with the test. And if we don't know, if it's not labeled, if we don't ask that question, so even when we talk to our doctors, like all of these things in terms of design need to change in terms of also design of the care process, because we need to start labeling to which populations this test really works on. Will it work for someone like me? Has it been tested for someone like me? And we should all start asking these questions to our physicians.
Excellent, excellent. So insightful. So as for diagnostics, I would love to address why it is so critical that we have diagnostics fully accessible and available to everyone in our country. And so that access issue of once it's FDA cleared, let's get it out and make sure that it's reimbursed and everyone has access to it, but also developing more diagnostics to really make sure that for certain conditions like endometriosis, that women don't suffer for 7 to 9 years of debilitating pain, bouncing around doctor to doctor, not getting a diagnosis. Or heart disease. Still, a lot of medical students are trained on what a white male, older male would experience with a heart attack, not what a woman. And so women get misdiagnosed and overwhelmingly are told that they have anxiety. So there are all these issues, I think, around sort of the education of the providers, but also diagnostics. And I know you're a real expert in diagnostics. So we'd love to hear your comments on that, Valerie.
Thank you, Liz. I would say a couple of things. I think we're in a renaissance for diagnostics because now at the dinner table, everyone talks about the COVID results, right? Was it the antigen result? Was it an antibody result? So antigen and antibodies to the scientists here that I'm surrounded with, it's just a common term, right? But to the lay individual, it's not. So I think we're being more educated. I think with this wave of education, we need to ensure that we understand 70 to 80% of medical decisions are made from diagnostics. So it's that's what's driving the doctor's decisions. The doctors can only do so much with a physical exam, so much with intake from the patient. It really is a diagnostics that's going to drive those next decisions. So I would say 2 things with diagnostics is number one is this road is long. I'm surrounded here by amazing individuals and we're talking about this technology, but the road is long. Even with an FDA cleared product, I have 2 FDA cleared products and I'm in guidelines. It is all about getting paid. And it's the payer side of this that if we don't change practice, so even if you have a great diagnostic, great sensitivity and specificity, but if it's not going to change the care paradigm, it will not be paid. So I think it's really, really important that we have to change the practice of these great ideas have to change how the doctors are managing those patients, and we have to improve outcomes. So I think it's really a two-headed coin. And I think it's really, really important as we design diagnostics, we have to understand those endpoints and work backwards. So it's a long road. It's not for those that are thin-skinned, Liz, but there's a huge opportunity. I think COVID is really going to open up the world to people, even home testing. You go in Walgreens and you can see their shelves with diagnostics. I think the patients are empowered, so let's go, but let's ensure that we're bringing technology to the marketplace that will really change the practice of medicine.
Awesome.
So thank you, Liz.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So Linda, you're going to bring it home for us in less than a minute. So I see this great question. I see lots of great questions and thank you for all that. But why do we keep talking about sex? Why is this important? And so, why, if you could just summarize the importance of why we still need to talk about sex differences and how we need to educate and drive dollars, because where we spend our dollars is what we prioritize. So we'd love to have you close out.
Well, just when you think about why we get excited about venture capital and innovation in the US, I still think people think of US as really the heart of innovation, right? If we don't get funding specifically towards the unique needs of women's health at that innovative early stage level, none of it's going to change, right? We can't just count on not-for-profits, right, to fund movement in this area. Again, if this is the HBS Health Alumni Association, I think most of us are capitalists at heart, right? And this is a $14 trillion industry in the US that's growing to at least 6%, right? And if you think about it, the innovation to date has been based on male health. So where does that leave the white space? The white space has got to be on this other side of the equation, right? So and we just need to focus energy, thought, dollars to get this to change. And how can you not make money, right? If you've got 50% of the market that could use these tools. So I drank the Kool-Aid, I hope the rest of you do as well. And there's no reason you can't, however, even if what you've got is a mutual fund, there's no reason you can't go to someone like Fidelity and at least ask your contact, is there a fund focused on women's health that I could, put money into? Is there a fund with female portfolio managers, because often they'll be more likely to focus on women's health, right? And just by asking the question starts getting these people to think, wow, maybe that should be a product that we offer to our clients. And also, I will say that I'm seeing some great women coming out of Harvard Business School who really want to go into women's health or investing in women's health. And it's nice to see that being prioritized among the MBAs.
Awesome. Great job, all of you. This was so informative. If you want to get more involved, you can email me. We put my email in there, but it's lpowell@g2gconsulting.com. We would be thrilled to have you in our efforts to change how we address women's health. Thank you so much.
Thank you to Liz and to Harvard.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you for organizing.
Thank you,
this.
Liz. And thank you to the Harvard alum. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you all so much for joining. We appreciate everybody's attendance, and we will send out the slide deck. And you can email me directly, susan.calcio@hbshealthalumni.org if you have any other questions, and I can try and get them to our panelists. So thank you very much.
Thanks.